The galaxy burned. Across 1,000,000 worlds, the fires of civil war consumed all that humanity had built during 2 centuries of the Great Crusade. The Imperium of mankind, that vast edifice of hope and conquest that had united humanity under the Emperor's golden vision, now stood upon the very precipice of annihilation. 7 long years had passed since the massacre at Isstvan V, where the true depth of Horus Lupercal's treachery had been laid bare in the most brutal and unforgiving fashion imaginable. The killing fields of that volcanic world had witnessed nothing less than the systematic slaughter of 3 entire Space Marine legions. These gene-forged warriors, humanity's finest and most terrible weapons, had been cut down by those they had once called brothers, by warriors with whom they had conquered the stars. The Iron Hands, the Salamanders, and the Raven Guard had been broken upon that black sand. Their primarchs were dead or missing, their surviving warriors scattered like leaves before a storm to the stellar winds, hunted and desperate across the galaxy. The aftermath of Isstvan V had sent shockwaves throughout the Imperium that reverberated still, echoing through the void between stars and shaking the foundations of every world loyal to Terra. What had begun as whispered rumors of rebellion in the outer reaches, as vague reports that few could believe, had crystallized into the horrifying reality of the Horus Heresy. The Warmaster himself, once the Emperor's most beloved son and the architect of humanity's greatest conquests, the hero of 1,000 battles and the very embodiment of the imperial dream, had turned his face from the light of Terra and embraced the ruinous powers of chaos. 4 entire Space Marine legions had followed him into damnation without hesitation. The sons of Horus, who bore their father's name with pride, the Death Guard, stoic and implacable, the Emperor's children who had once sought perfection in all things, and the World Eaters whose hunger for violence had finally found its ultimate expression. But these 4 were not alone in their betrayal. The word-bearers had been the architects of this corruption from the very beginning, their dark apostles spreading the cancerous doctrine of chaos worship throughout the galaxy like a plague. The Iron Warriors had brought their expertise in siege warfare to bear against the Imperium's fortress worlds, reducing bastions that had stood for centuries to rubble and ash. The Night Lords had unleashed their reign of terror across countless systems, leaving behind populations broken in spirit long before the final blow fell. And the Alpha Legion had sown confusion and discord through their labyrinthine schemes, their true motives remaining hidden even from their allies. The strategic situation that emerged from this catastrophic betrayal had fundamentally altered the balance of power within the galaxy. The traitor forces, now calling themselves the Warmaster's legions, controlled vast swathes of imperial space. Their fleets moved with impunity through sectors that had once been bastions of imperial authority, their passage marked by the death of worlds and the corruption of all they touched. Forged worlds that had produced the war machines of the Great Crusade now turned their manufactorums to serve the Warmaster's cause, their ancient forges burning with unholy fire. Entire planetary systems declared for Horus, their populations either genuinely converted to his cause or cowed into submission by the brutal efficiency of his military machine. The loyalist forces found themselves fighting a war on multiple fronts, their strength divided and their resources stretched impossibly thin. Communications were disrupted across entire sectors. Supply lines were severed, leaving loyal worlds isolated and vulnerable. The command structure that had coordinated the Great Crusade's greatest triumphs was fragmented, its unity shattered by betrayal and distance. The Ultramarines, the largest of the loyal legions, had been caught off guard by the word-bearers' assault on Calth. Their homeworld of Macragge was threatened, and their Primarch, Robout Guilliman, was forced to fight a desperate defensive campaign in the Ultramar sector, unable to come to Terra's aid when he was needed most. The Dark Angels under Lion Eljansen had become embroiled in a shadow war against the Night Lords, their pursuit of the traitors taking them far from Terra through the darkest reaches of space. The Space Wolves had been manipulated into a devastating conflict with the Thousand Suns at Prospero, leaving both legions severely weakened and Lemon Russ's warriors scattered across the galaxy, their fury spent in a war of the Emperor's own making. Yet of all the blows struck against the Imperial cause, none cut deeper than the corruption of Horus Lupercal himself, the Primarch who had once stood as the Emperor's right hand, who had led the Great Crusade to its gree. Ada's triumphs and embodied everything the Imperium aspired to become, had been transformed into something altogether more sinister. His fall had not been sudden, but gradual, a slow poisoning of his soul that had begun on the feral world of Davin. There, in the depths of an ancient temple dedicated to the Chaos gods, Horus had been mortally wounded by a blade tainted with the essence of Nurgle. The warrior lodges that had spread throughout his legion, seemingly innocent brotherhoods that cut across the rigid hierarchies of the Astartes, had been the vector through which the corruption spread. The healing ritual performed by the word-bearer chaplain Erebus had been the final trap, the moment when all was lost. In the warp-touched depths of the Serpent Lodge's temple, Horus had been shown visions of a future where the Emperor ruled as a god, where the Primarchs were forgotten, and where humanity had abandoned the imperial truth in favor of religious worship. These visions, carefully crafted by the Chaos gods to exploit every doubt and resentment, had played upon Horus's deepest fears. The sight of the Emperor, enthroned as a deity, while his sons were reduced to mere legends, had shattered something fundamental within the Warmaster's psyche. The physical transformation that followed had been as dramatic as the spiritual corruption. Horus's once noble features had become marked by the touch of chaos. His eyes now burned with an unholy light that spoke of powers beyond mortal comprehension. His armor, the magnificent world-breaker plate that had been crafted by the finest artificers of Mars, had been reforged in the fires of the warp itself. The Eye of Horus, once a symbol of unity and conquest, had become a blasphemous icon that adorned the banners of traitor forces across the galaxy. His very presence had become a conduit for the malevolent energies of the warp. His words carried a power that could turn loyal servants of the Emperor into fanatical devotees of chaos. Yet the Warmaster's strategic genius had not diminished with his fall. If anything, it had been enhanced by the dark gifts of his new patrons. The campaign that followed the drop site massacre had been a masterpiece of military planning, combining conventional warfare with the reality-warping powers of chaos. Horus understood that a direct assault on Terra would be futile without first weakening the Imperium's ability to respond. His forces struck at key industrial worlds, disrupting the production of weapons and supplies that the loyalist forces desperately needed. Forge worlds were corrupted or destroyed, their Titan legions either turning traitor or being annihilated in the process. The march on Terra had been inexorable, a tide of corruption and destruction that swept across the galaxy. Star systems that had known peace for centuries found themselves battleground where space marines fought their own gene brothers in conflicts that defied all logic and reason. The traitor fleets grew stronger with each victory, their ranks swollen by turncoat Imperial army regiments, corrupted Mechanicum forces, and the dark spawn of chaos itself. Demons had begun to manifest in real space with increasing frequency, their presence a testament to the growing influence of the warp upon the material universe. On Terra itself, the Emperor faced an impossible choice. The Webway Project, his grand design to free humanity from its dependence on warp travel, demanded his constant attention. Deep beneath the Imperial Palace, in chambers that existed partially outside normal space-time, the Emperor maintained a psychic vigil that prevented the forces of chaos from pouring through the breaches that had been torn in the ancient Eldar construct. The project had been sabotaged by Magnus the Red's psychic warning about Horus's treachery. The Crimson King's desperate attempt to contact his father had shattered the psychic barriers that protected the human sections of the webway. And now, the Emperor could not abandon his post without dooming humanity to demonic invasion from within. The Emperor's confinement to the Golden Throne had left the defense of Terra in the hands of others. Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's most trusted advisor and the first Lord Regent of the Imperium, had taken on the burden of coordinating the Imperium's response to the heresy. This ancient psyker's powers had been stretched to their absolute limits as he attempted to maintain some semblance of order in the face of galactic civil war. His network of agents and informants worked tirelessly to gather intelligence on the traitor force's movements, while his administrative genius kept the machinery of imperial government functioning, despite the chaos that surrounded it. The recall of the loyal Primarchs to Terra had been a desperate measure born of necessity. Rogal Dorn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, had been the first to answer the call. His legion's expertise in fortification and siege warfare made them invaluable for the defense of the Throneworld. Dorn himself had thrown himself into the task of preparing Terra's defenses with the methodical precision that characterized all his endeavors. The Imperial Palace, already a fortress of unimaginable scale, had been transformed into something that defied conventional military thinking. Entire districts had been converted into killing grounds, their streets and buildings designed to channel attacking forces into predetermined zones where they could be destroyed by concentrated firepower. The palace's defenses had been expanded far beyond their original parameters. The Eternity Wall, the massive fortification that surrounded the inner palace, had been reinforced with additional weapon emplacements and shield generators. The Saturnine Wall, a secondary line of defense, had been constructed to provide multiple fallback positions for the defending forces. The Daylight Wall, facing the primary spaceport, had been turned into a fortress within a fortress, its battlements bristling with macro cannons and void shield projectors capable of bringing down attacking aircraft and orbital assault craft. Jagatai Khan had brought his White Scars to Terra with characteristic speed, their bike squadrons and fast attack vehicles providing the mobile element that Dorn's static defenses required. The Khan's warriors had been tasked with conducting rapid response operations, their ability to strike quickly and withdraw before the enemy could respond, making them ideal for disrupting traitor assault formations. The Primarch himself struggled with the constraints of defensive warfare, his nature more suited to the open steppes of his homeworld than the confines of Terra's urban sprawl. Sanguinius had arrived with his blood angels in the final months before the siege began. His legion's reputation for savage close-quarters combat made them invaluable for the brutal fighting that everyone knew was coming. The angel's presence provided a much-needed boost to morale among the defenders, his nobility and grace serving as a stark contrast to the corruption that approached from the outer system. The Blood Angels had been deployed to the most critical sections of the palace's defenses, their gene seed flaws carefully monitored to prevent the Red Thirst from compromising their effectiveness at the crucial moment. The strategic withdrawal to the Sol system had been conducted with the precision of a master chess player sacrificing pieces to protect the king. Loyalist forces throughout the galaxy had been ordered to fall back to Terra or to conduct delaying actions that would slow the traitor advance. The cost had been enormous. Entire sectors abandoned to the enemy in order to concentrate the remaining loyal forces for the final battle. Refugee fleets streamed into the Sol system, their holds packed with civilians fleeing the advancing tide of corruption. The outer planets of the Sol system had been fortified as secondary defensive positions. Mars, the red planet that served as the heart of the Mechanicum, had become a battleground in its own right as loyalist and traitor tech priests fought for control of the ancient forges. The Jovian moons had been converted into weapons platforms, their surfaces covered with orbital defense installations that could engage enemy fleets at extreme range. Even Luna, Terra's ancient satellite, had been transformed into a fortress, its underground cities serving as staging areas for the final defense. The traitor fleet's approach had been detected by long-range augur arrays months before their arrival in the outer system. The size of the armada had been staggering, thousands of vessels ranging from massive battleships to converted merchant haulers pressed into military service. The sight of the vengeful spirit, Horus's flagship, at the head of the fleet, sent a chill through even the most hardened defenders. The ship that had once been the pride of the Great Crusade had been transformed into something altogether more sinister, its hull bearing the marks of chaos corruption, and its weapons capable of bringing ruin to entire worlds. The final phase of the Horus Heresy had begun with the traitor fleet's translation into real space at the edge of the Sol system. The die had been cast, and the fate of humanity would be decided in the battles to come. The Emperor's great work hung in the balance, 10,000 years of human progress threatened by the ambitions of a fallen sun and the malevolent powers that whispered in the warp. The Siege of Terra would be more than a military campaign. It would be a battle for the very soul of humanity itself. The transformation of Terra into the ultimate fortress began in earnest as the traitor fleet's approach became inevitable. Rogal Dorn threw himself into this monumental task with the methodical precision that defined his character, treating the fortification of the Throneworld not as a desperate last stand, but as the greatest engineering challenge of his existence. The Primarch of the Imperial Fists understood that conventional defensive thinking would prove inadequate against the forces arrayed against Terra. This would not be a siege in the traditional sense, but a collision between two fundamentally opposed visions of humanity's future, where every street corner and hab block would become a potential killing ground. The Imperial Palace itself had already been a fortress of staggering proportions before Dorn's modifications began. Covering an area larger than many continents, the palace complex had been built upon the foundations of the ancient Himalayan mountain range, its spires reaching into the upper atmosphere while its foundations delved deep into the planet's crust. The palace's original architects had designed it to be both a seat of government and a symbol of imperial might. But Dorn recognized that symbolism would count for nothing if the walls could not hold against the Warmaster's assault. The construction of the Eternity Gate represented the pinnacle of Dorn's defensive philosophy. This massive portal, standing nearly a kilometer in height and fashioned from adamantium and ceramic composites, served as the primary entrance to the inner palace. The gate itself was a marvel of engineering, its surface inscribed with protective wards and equipped with void shield generators that could withstand direct hits from Titan-class weapons. The approaches to the Eternity Gate were designed as a killing field, with overlapping fields of fire from concealed weapon emplacements and carefully positioned obstacles that would force attacking forces into predetermined channels where they could be systematically destroyed. The defensive networks that Dorn established throughout the palace complex defied conventional military logic in their scope and complexity. The Saturnine Wall, a secondary line of fortification that enclosed vast sections of the palace, had been expanded with additional bastions and redoubts. Each section of the wall was designed to operate independently, with its own command structure and supply lines, ensuring that the loss of one section would not compromise the entire defensive network. The wall's battlements were equipped with macro cannons capable of engaging targets at extreme range, while closer-in defenses included rapid-fire auto cannons and flamers positioned to sweep the approaches clear of infantry. The Daylight Wall, facing the primary spaceport and the most likely avenue of approach for the traitor forces, received particular attention from Dorn's engineers. This section of the defenses was transformed into a fortress within a fortress, its multiple layers of walls and obstacles designed to channel attacking forces into carefully prepared killing zones. The wall's weapon emplacements included some of the most advanced defensive systems available to the Imperium, including experimental plasma cannons and graviton weapons that could tear apart attacking vehicles and aircraft with equal efficiency. Orbital weapons platforms represented another crucial element of Terra's defensive preparations. These massive installations, positioned at key points throughout the Sol system, were designed to engage enemy fleets before they could reach Terra's atmosphere. The platforms themselves were essentially spaceborne fortresses, their hulls bristling with lance batteries and nova cannons capable of crippling even the largest battleships. The construction of these platforms had required the combined efforts of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Imperial Navy, with entire Forge worlds dedicating their production capacity to the creation of these defensive installations. The integration of void shield technology throughout Terra's defenses represented a significant advancement in defensive capabilities. These energy barriers, originally developed for use on Imperial starships, were adapted for planetary defense on a scale never before attempted. The void shields were arranged in overlapping layers, creating multiple defensive barriers that would force attacking forces to concentrate their firepower on specific points, allowing the defenders to respond with concentrated counterfire. The power requirements for these installations were enormous, requiring the construction of dedicated plasma reactors and geothermal taps that drew energy from Terra's molten core. The mobilization of the Imperial Army proceeded with the same methodical precision that characterized all of Dorn's preparations. Entire regiments were recalled from campaigns throughout the galaxy, their transports arriving at Terra's spaceports in a constant stream of military traffic. The Praetorian Guard, Terra's elite military formation, was expanded to include veterans from dozens of different campaigns, their experience in conventional warfare providing a crucial complement to the superhuman capabilities of the Space Marines. These Orcs were organized into defensive sectors, each assigned to specific sections of the palace complex, and equipped with weapons and equipment appropriate to their expected role in the coming battle. The integration of civilian populations into the defensive structure represented one of the most challenging aspects of the preparation. Terra's population numbered in the hundreds of billions, concentrated in massive hive cities that stretched across entire continents. Rather than attempting to evacuate these populations, Dorn's planners recognized that they could serve as a valuable resource if properly organized and equipped. Civilian defense forces were established in each major population center, their members trained in basic combat techniques and equipped with lasguns and other infantry weapons. These forces were not expected to engage Space Marines in direct combat, but they could serve as scouts, saboteurs, and auxiliary troops in support of the main defensive effort. The Adeptus Mechanicus forces stationed on Terra played a crucial role in the fortification efforts. The tech priests of Mars had long maintained a significant presence on the Throneworld, their forges and laboratories producing some of the most advanced technology in the Imperium. These facilities were now converted to military production, their assembly lines churning out weapons, ammunition, and defensive equipment at an unprecedented rate. The Mechanicus forces themselves, including Skitarii legions and Titan maniples, were integrated into the defensive plans, their advanced weaponry and cybernetic enhancements making them particularly effective against the corrupted forces that served the Warmaster. The establishment of anti-orbital batteries throughout Terra's surface represented a massive undertaking that required the coordination of multiple Imperial agencies. These installations, ranging from relatively small laser batteries to massive macro cannons capable of engaging starships in orbit, were positioned to provide overlapping coverage of Terra's airspace. The batteries were connected by underground communication networks that allowed for coordinated fire control, ensuring that attacking aircraft and dropships would face concentrated defensive fire from multiple directions simultaneously. The integration of the palace's ancient archaeotech defenses with newer Imperial technology presented unique challenges for Dorn's engineers. The palace had been built upon the foundations of structures that predated the Age of Strife, their builders possessing knowledge and techniques that had been lost to the current age. Many of these ancient systems remained functional, their power sources and control mechanisms incomprehensible to even the most learned tech priests. Rather than attempting to understand these systems completely, Dorn's engineers focused on integrating them with newer defensive installations, creating hybrid systems that combined the reliability of Imperial technology with the mysterious power of archaeotech devices. The psychological preparation of Terra's defenders proved to be as important as the physical fortifications. The knowledge that they faced their own Gene brothers in combat weighed heavily on the Space Marines assigned to the defense, while the Imperial Army troops struggled to comprehend the scale of the betrayal that had torn the Imperium apart. Chaplains from the loyal legions worked tirelessly to maintain morale among the defenders, their sermons emphasizing the righteousness of their cause and the necessity of standing firm against the corruption that approached from the outer system. The Emperor's final instructions to his remaining loyal Primarchs were delivered in private audiences held deep within the palace's most secure chambers. These meetings, conducted in the shadow of the Golden Throne itself, represented the last direct communication between the Emperor and his sons, before he was forced to dedicate his full attention to maintaining the barriers that held back the forces of chaos from the damaged webway. The Emperor's words to each Primarch were tailored to their individual strengths and weaknesses, providing guidance that would prove crucial in the battles to come. Rogal Dorn received detailed instructions regarding the conduct of the siege, including specific guidance on when and how to conduct tactical withdrawals that would draw the traitor forces deeper into prepared killing zones. The Emperor emphasized the importance of maintaining the integrity of the inner palace at all costs, making it clear that the defense of the Eternity Gate and the approaches to the throne room represented the absolute priority for the Imperial Fists and their allies. Sanguinius was provided with intelligence regarding the nature of the corruption that had taken hold among the traitor legions, including warnings about the demonic entities that now fought alongside the Warmaster's forces. The Emperor's instructions to the Angel included specific tactical recommendations for combating these supernatural threats, drawing upon knowledge that predated the Great Crusade and the founding of the Imperium itself. Jagatai Khan received orders that emphasized the importance of maintaining mobility and flexibility in the face of the traitor assault. The Emperor recognized that the White Scar's traditional tactics would need to be adapted to the constraints of defensive warfare, but he also understood that their speed and agility could be crucial in responding to unexpected developments during the siege. The final preparations for Terra's defense extended far beyond the immediate vicinity of the Imperial Palace. The planet's industrial capacity was mobilized to support the war effort, with factories and manufactorums across the globe converted to military production. The ancient forges of the Urals churned out ammunition and spare parts, while the shipyards of the Pacific produced small craft and atmospheric fighters that would be crucial in the coming battle. Even Terra's agricultural regions were pressed into service, their output redirected to feed the millions of defenders who would soon face the Warmaster's assault. The establishment of command and control networks throughout the defensive system represented a crucial element of the preparations. Communication arrays were hardened against electromagnetic interference and psychic attack, while backup systems were established to ensure that defensive coordination could continue even if primary communication networks were compromised. The command bunkers themselves were constructed to withstand direct hits from orbital bombardment, their walls lined with psychic dampening materials that would prevent enemy psykers from disrupting defensive operations. As the traitor fleet drew closer to the inner system, the final elements of Terra's defenses were put into place. The void shields were brought online, their energy barriers shimmering in the thin atmosphere above the palace's highest spires. The orbital weapons platforms reported ready status, their crews prepared to engage the enemy fleet as soon as it came within range. Throughout the palace complex and across Terra's surface, millions of defenders took their positions, their weapons loaded, and their resolve steeled for the battle that would determine the fate of humanity itself. The armada that translated into real space at the edge of the Sol system represented the largest concentration of military force ever assembled in human history. The Warmaster's fleet stretched across hundreds of thousands of kilometers of void, its constituent vessels ranging from massive battleships that had served as the backbone of the Great Crusade to hastily converted merchant haulers pressed into military service. At the heart of this vast formation sailed the vengeful spirit, Horus Lupercal's flagship, its hull bearing the scars of 7 years of continuous warfare and the unmistakable marks of chaos corruption that had transformed it from a symbol of imperial might into something altogether more sinister. The Sons of Horus formed the core of the invasion force, their fleet elements maintaining the disciplined formations that had made them the most feared legion during the Great Crusade. The Warmaster's own legion had been the first to embrace the gifts of the Chaos Gods, their gene seed gradually corrupting as the influence of the warp took hold. Their battle barges and strike cruisers bore fresh scars from the campaigns that had brought them to Terra's doorstep, their hulls adorned with trophies taken from loyalist vessels destroyed during the long march to the Throneworld. The Legion's tactical doctrine had evolved significantly since their fall, incorporating demonic allies and warp-spawned horrors that defied conventional military thinking. The World Eaters brought their own distinctive brand of savagery to the invasion fleet. Angron's legion had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all the traitor forces, their descent into mindless bloodlust accelerated by the butcher's nails that had been implanted in their skulls. Their vessels showed clear signs of the legion's deteriorating discipline, with hull modifications that served no tactical purpose beyond satisfying their hunger for violence. Boarding spikes and ram prows had been welded to ships never designed for such brutal modifications, while the internal spaces had been reconfigured to accommodate gladiatorial pits, where the Astartes could indulge their need for constant combat. The Emperor's children represented the most visually striking element of the traitor fleet, their vessels bearing the elaborate decorations and artistic modifications that reflected their legion's obsession with perfection and excess. Fulgrim's warriors had embraced the patronage of Slaanesh with characteristic enthusiasm, their ships becoming floating galleries of depravity and sensory overload. The sonic weapons that had become their signature armament were integrated into their vessels' weapon systems, creating weapons platforms capable of devastating enemy formations through pure acoustic destruction. The Legion's pursuit of perfection had led them to experiment with ship designs that pushed the boundaries of both engineering and sanity. The Death Guard brought their own grim contribution to the invasion force, their vessels bearing the unmistakable marks of Nurgle's corruption. Mortarian's legion had embraced decay and entropy as tools of war, their ships becoming breeding grounds for plagues and diseases that could devastate entire worlds. The hulls of their vessels were pitted and corroded, their surfaces covered with growths and excrescences that spoke of the plague god's influence. The Legion's expertise in chemical warfare had been adapted for void combat, Their ships equipped with specialized systems capable of deploying toxic clouds and corrosive agents that could eat through enemy armor and life support systems. The Iron Warriors provided the siege expertise that would prove crucial in the assault on Terra's defenses. Perturabo's legion had always specialized in the reduction of fortified positions, their methodical approach to warfare making them invaluable for the systematic destruction of defensive installations. Their fleet included specialized siege vessels, equipped with massive bombardment cannons and void shield disruptors, designed specifically for attacking planetary fortifications. The Legion's engineers had spent years developing new siege techniques and weapon systems, their bitter experience at the Iron Cage serving as motivation for their preparations to assault the Imperial Palace. The Dark Mechanicum forces that accompanied the traitor fleet represented a significant departure from the orthodox teachings of the Omnissiah. These tech priests had embraced the dark knowledge offered by the Chaos Gods, their forges producing weapons and war machines that incorporated demonic essence and warp-touch technology. Their vessels were hybrid constructions that combined traditional Imperial engineering with innovations that would have been considered heretical by their loyalist counterparts. Demon engines and possessed machines formed a significant portion of their ground forces, these constructs representing the fusion of flesh, metal, and demonic essence that characterized the Dark Mechanicum's approach to warfare. The Titan legions that marched with the Warmaster represented some of the most devastating weapons in the traitor arsenal. The Legio Mortis, the Death's Heads, had been among the first Titan legions to declare for Horus, their god machines bearing the colors of the Warmaster and the eight-pointed star of chaos. These massive war engines had been modified with demonic components and warp-touched weapon systems that enhanced their already formidable capabilities. The princeps who commanded these titans had undergone their own transformation, their minds touched by the influence of the warp, and their connection to their machines deepened through rituals that would have been considered abhorrent by the loyalist Mechanicum. The Legio Vulpa, the Fire Wasps, brought their own specialized expertise to the invasion force. This Titan Legion had always favored close-range combat and urban warfare, their god machines equipped with flamers and melta-weapons designed for the systematic destruction of fortified positions. The Legion's tactical doctrine emphasized the use of overwhelming firepower to break enemy morale, their Titans advancing in coordinated formations that could reduce entire city blocks to molten slag. The corruption of chaos had enhanced their destructive capabilities, their weapons now incorporating demonic fire that could burn through even the most advanced defensive systems. The Night Houses that had declared for the Warmaster added their own mobile firepower to the invasion force. These ancient warrior houses had been corrupted through a combination of political manipulation and direct exposure to chaos influence, their pilots gradually succumbing to the whispers of the dark gods. The night suits themselves had been modified with demonic components and warp-touched weapon systems, their machine spirits replaced with bound demons that enhanced their combat capabilities while slowly driving their pilots toward madness. The traditional codes of honor that had governed these houses for millennia had been twisted into dark parodies of their former selves. Horus's strategic planning for the assault on Terra demonstrated the tactical genius that had made him the Emperor's chosen Warmaster. The Primarch understood that a direct assault on the Imperial Palace would result in catastrophic casualties for his forces, regardless of their numerical superiority. Instead, he developed a multi-pronged strategy that would force the defenders to divide their attention and resources across multiple fronts simultaneously. The plan called for coordinated attacks on key strategic objectives that would systematically degrade Terra's defensive capabilities while drawing the Loyalist forces away from their prepared positions. The Lion's Gate Spaceport represented the primary objective for the initial phase of the assault. This massive facility served as Terra's primary interface with orbital traffic, and its capture would allow the traitor forces to land their heaviest equipment and establish a secure beachhead on the planet's surface. The spaceport's defenses were formidable, but Horus recognized that its size and complexity made it vulnerable to the kind of coordinated assault that his forces could deliver. The capture of the spaceport would also provide symbolic value, demonstrating to the defenders that even Terra's most heavily fortified installations could fall to the Warmaster's forces. The assault on the palace walls themselves would require careful coordination between multiple Legion elements and their supporting forces. Horus planned to use the Iron Warrior's siege expertise to breach the outer defensive lines, while the World Eaters and Emperor's children would exploit these breaches to establish footholds within the palace complex. The Death Guard would be responsible for securing the flanks of these assaults, their resistance to conventional weapons making them ideal for holding captured positions against loyalist counterattacks. The Sons of Horus would serve as the mobile reserve, ready to exploit any breakthrough that developed during the assault. The Warmaster's internal struggle with the corruption that had taken hold of his body and soul added a desperate urgency to his planning. The gifts of the Chaos Gods came with a price, and Horus could feel his humanity slipping away with each passing day. The visions that had originally driven him to rebellion now seemed distant and uncertain, replaced by the constant whispers of the dark gods and the growing influence of the warp upon his consciousness. His physical form had been transformed as well, his once noble features marked by the touch of chaos, and his strength enhanced by powers that came from beyond the material universe. The approach of loyalist reinforcements added another layer of complexity to the Warmaster's calculations. Intelligence reports indicated that Robot Guilliman's Ultramarines were fighting their way through the galactic south, their fleet elements gradually overcoming the obstacles that had been placed in their path. The Dark Angels under Lion Eljansen remained unaccounted for, their whereabouts unknown, but their potential intervention a constant concern for the traitor High Command. Most significantly, reports suggested that Lemon Russ and his Space Wolves were also moving toward Terra, their fleet having been detected in the outer reaches of the Segmentum Solar. The time factor that dominated all of Horus's strategic thinking stemmed from his understanding of the Emperor's current situation. The Warmaster knew that his father remained trapped upon the Golden Throne, his attention focused on maintaining the barriers that prevented the forces of chaos from pouring through the damaged webway. This presented a unique opportunity, but one that would not last indefinitely. If the Emperor could complete his work on the webway project, or if sufficient loyalist reinforcements arrived to break the siege, the traitor cause would be lost. The assault on Terra had to succeed quickly and decisively before the strategic balance could shift in favor of the loyalists. The logistical challenges of maintaining such a massive invasion force in the Sol system required careful planning and coordination. The traitor fleet's supply lines stretched back across half the galaxy, their ships dependent on captured Imperial facilities and Dark Mechanicum forges for resupply and maintenance. The corruption of chaos had made some of these logistical concerns less pressing, as demonic allies required no conventional supplies and warp-touched weapons could function without traditional ammunition. However, the majority of the traitor forces still required food, fuel, and spare parts, making the establishment of secure supply lines a crucial element of the overall strategy. The integration of demonic forces into the invasion plans represented perhaps the most significant departure from conventional Imperial military doctrine. The entities that served the Chaos Gods operated according to their own alien logic, their motivations and capabilities often incomprehensible to mortal minds. Horus had learned to work with these forces through years of experience, but their presence added an element of unpredictability to his plans that conventional military thinking could not account for. The demon's ability to manifest in real space was limited by the strength of the warp in the local area, but their presence on Terra itself, with its concentration of psychic energy and emotional resonance, would make them far more powerful than they had been in previous campaigns. The psychological warfare aspects of the invasion were carefully planned to maximize their impact on the defenders' morale. The traitor forces had spent years perfecting techniques designed to break the will of their enemies before battle was even joined. The corruption of former loyalists and the display of captured imperial symbols and banners served to demonstrate the futility of resistance. The presence of fallen primarchs and corrupted space marines would have a particularly devastating effect on the loyalist Astartes, forcing them to confront the reality that their own Gene brothers had chosen damnation over duty. The naval component of the assault would require careful coordination between the various fleet elements to maximize their effectiveness against Terra's orbital defenses. The traitor fleet's numerical superiority would be offset by the defenders' advantages in terms of prepared positions and coordinated fire control. Horus planned to use feint attacks and diversionary maneuvers to draw the orbital defense platforms out of position, creating gaps in the defensive network that could be exploited by his assault forces. The fleet's heavy units would concentrate their fire on specific sections of the defensive grid, overwhelming the void shields and weapon systems through sheer volume of fire. The first phase of the Siege of Terra began not with the thunder of macro cannons or the roar of drop pods breaking atmosphere, but with the subtle dance of reconnaissance fleets probing the outer reaches of the Sol system. The traitor advance elements, comprised primarily of fast escort vessels and modified merchant raiders, had been operating in the system's periphery for weeks before the main fleet's arrival. These scouts mapped the defensive installations that ringed humanity's birthworld, their auger arrays cataloging the positions of orbital weapons platforms and the patrol routes of loyalist naval squadrons. The Kuiper Belt installations were the first to fall silent. These remote monitoring stations, positioned at the very edge of the Sol system, had been designed to provide early warning of approaching fleets. Their crews, numbering in the hundreds of thousands across dozens of facilities, found themselves facing an enemy that defied conventional tactical doctrine. The attack patterns employed by the traitor scouts incorporated hit-and-run tactics that exploited the vast distances between installations, preventing the defenders from coordinating their response effectively. The station's void shields, designed to protect against asteroid impacts and solar radiation, proved inadequate against concentrated lance fire from multiple directions. The fall of monitoring station Xerxes 7 exemplified the systematic nature of the traitor advance. The facility, built into a captured asteroid and equipped with long-range Vox transmitters capable of reaching Terra directly, had detected the approach of 3 escort vessels bearing the colors of the Sons of Horus. The station commander, a veteran of the Great Crusade named Captain Mortian Vex, had attempted to transmit a warning to the inner system before the attackers could close to weapons range. The traitor vessels responded by launching boarding torpedoes, while simultaneously engaging the station's defensive turrets with precision lance strikes. The boarding action that followed demonstrated the tactical evolution that had occurred within the traitor legions since their fall to chaos. The Sons of Horus assault teams moved through the station's corridors with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural, their movements guided by intelligence that should have been impossible to obtain. The defenders found themselves facing Astartes whose tactical awareness had been enhanced by the gifts of the Dark Gods, their ability to predict enemy movements and exploit weaknesses elevated beyond normal human comprehension. The station's internal defenses, including automated turret systems and blast doors designed to compartmentalize the facility, were systematically bypassed or destroyed. The corruption of the station's machine spirits represented a new and terrifying development in the traitor arsenal. Dark Mechanicum, adepts accompanying the boarding parties employed techniques that violated the fundamental principles of the Omnissiah's teachings, their rituals binding demonic essence to the facility's cogitator systems. The possessed machines turned against their former masters, blast doors sealing loyalist defenders into sections that were then vented to space, while automated systems began broadcasting false all-clear signals to other installations in the network. Mars presented a far more complex challenge for the traitor forces than the isolated monitoring stations of the Outer S. Isstvan, the Red Planet, had been the heart of the Mechanicum since the earliest days of the Great Crusade, its forges producing the weapons and war machines that had enabled humanity's expansion across the galaxy. The civil war that had erupted within the Mechanicum itself had turned Mars into a battlefield where ancient allies fought with weapons that pushed the boundaries of human understanding. Fabricator General Kelberhal's declaration for the Warmaster had split the Mechanicum down the middle, with roughly half of the tech priests and their associated forces remaining loyal to the Emperor, while the others embraced the dark knowledge offered by the Chaos Gods. The loyalist forces, led by figures such as Fabricator Locum Kane and supported by elements of the Legio Ignatum Titan Legion, had established defensive positions around the most critical forge complexes. Their opponents, now calling themselves the Dark Mechanicum, had begun implementing modifications to their war machines that incorporated demonic essence and warp-touch technology. The first major engagement on Mars occurred at the Olympus Mons Forge complex, where the Loyalist forces had concentrated their heaviest industrial capacity. The attacking Dark Mechanicum forces employed a combination of conventional siege tactics and heretical innovations that caught the defenders off guard. Demon engines, their metal shells housing bound entities from the warp, advanced through the complex's outer defenses with an unpredictability that made them nearly impossible to target effectively. These constructs moved with a fluid grace that defied their mechanical nature, their weapon systems incorporating technologies that should not have been possible within the constraints of real space physics. The Skidari legions that fought on both sides of the conflict demonstrated the fundamental philosophical divide that had torn the Mechanicum apart. The Loyalist forces maintained their traditional doctrine of precise, coordinated advances supported by overwhelming firepower from their heavy weapons teams. Their opponents had abandoned such constraints, their movements guided by the whispers of machine spirits that had been corrupted by exposure to the warp. The Dark Mechanicum Skidara advanced in formations that seemed chaotic to outside observers, but followed patterns that reflected the alien logic of their demonic allies. The Titan combat that erupted across Mars's surface represented warfare on a scale that dwarfed even the massive battles of the Great Crusade. The god machines of the Legio Tempestus found themselves facing opponents whose capabilities had been enhanced by modifications that violated every principle of the Omnissiah's teachings. The corrupted titans of the Legio Mortis moved with an agility that their original designs had never possessed, their reactor cores burning with fires that drew power from the warp itself. The weapons they carried incorporated demonic essence that allowed them to punch through void shields and armor plating with an efficiency that defied conventional understanding. The psychological impact of these battles on the Loyalist defenders cannot be overstated. The tech priests of Mars had dedicated their lives to the pursuit of knowledge and the perfection of the machine, their faith in the Omnissiah serving as the foundation for their entire worldview. To see their former colleagues embrace technologies that incorporated demonic corruption represented a fundamental challenge to everything they believed. The machine spirits that had been their constant companions for decades or centuries began to whisper of forbidden knowledge and dark gifts, forcing the loyalists to question the very nature of their relationship with the machines they served. The orbital installations that protected the inner system presented the traitor forces with their first taste of the defensive preparations that Rogal Dorn had implemented throughout the Sol system. These weapons platforms, ranging from converted asteroids to purpose-built fortress stations, had been positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire that would force attacking fleets to run a gauntlet of defensive fire before they could reach Terra's atmosphere. The platforms themselves were marvels of Imperial engineering, their hulls constructed from adamantium and ceramic composites that could withstand direct hits from battleship-class weapons. The assault on defense platform Sigma 12 demonstrated the tactical innovations that the traitor forces had developed during their long march to Terra. The platform, positioned at the edge of the asteroid belt and equipped with Nova cannon batteries capable of engaging targets at extreme range, had been designed to operate independently for extended periods. Its crew of 50,000 included naval armsmen, mechanicum tech priests, and a small garrison of Imperial fists who served as the platform's primary defensive force. The attack began with a coordinated strike by multiple squadrons of Thunderhawk gunships launched from the traitor fleet carriers. These assault craft had been modified with additional armor plating and void shields, allowing them to survive the initial defensive fire as they closed with the platform. The gunship's assault cannons and lascannons targeted the platform's point defense systems, systematically destroying the automated turrets and missile launchers that formed the installation's close-range defensive network. The boarding action that followed showcased the tactical evolution that had occurred within the traitor legions since their fall to chaos. The assault teams moved through the platform's corridors with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural, their movements guided by intelligence that should have been impossible to obtain. The defenders found themselves facing Astartes, whose combat abilities had been enhanced by the gifts of the Dark Gods. Their strength and speed elevated beyond the already superhuman capabilities of the Space Marines. The corruption of the platform systems proceeded with a methodical precision that spoke to the Dark Mechanicum's growing expertise in the subversion of Imperial technology. Tech priests accompanying the boarding parties employed rituals that bound demonic essence to the facility's machine spirits, turning the platform's own systems against its defenders. Blast doors sealed loyalist forces into sections that were then vented to space, while the platform's weapon systems began targeting nearby loyalist installations instead of the attacking traitor forces. The Luna defensive network represented the final major obstacle between the traitor fleet and Terra itself. The ancient satellite had been transformed into a fortress moon, its surface covered with weapon emplacements, and its underground cities serving as staging areas for the system's mobile reserves. The Selenargene cults that had ruled Luna before the Emperor's conquest had been replaced by Imperial administrators, but the moon's industrial capacity had been expanded to support the war effort. The first probing attacks against Luna's defenses revealed the extent of the preparations that had been made for the system's defense. The moon's surface was protected by overlapping void shield generators that created multiple layers of defensive barriers, while its weapon emplacements included some of the most advanced systems available to the Imperium. The defenders had learned from the fall of the outer system installations, implementing new tactical doctrines that emphasized rapid response and coordinated fire control. The traitor forces' response to these defenses demonstrated the tactical flexibility that had made Horus Lupercal the Emperor's chosen Warmaster. Rather than attempting a direct assault on Luna's most heavily defended positions, the traitor fleet concentrated its efforts on the Moon's polar regions, where the defensive coverage was less comprehensive. The attack employed a combination of orbital bombardment and ground assault that forced the defenders to divide their attention between multiple threats simultaneously. The deployment of chaos-corrupted war machines during these initial engagements marked a significant escalation in the conflict's intensity. The demon engines that accompanied the traitor ground forces operated according to principles that defied conventional military logic, their movements guided by the alien intelligence of the entities bound within their metal shells. These constructs advanced through defensive fire that should have destroyed conventional vehicles, their demonic essence allowing them to survive damage that would have crippled normal war machines. The psychological impact of these manifestations on the Imperial defenders was immediate and devastating. The soldiers of the Imperial army had been trained to fight human enemies using conventional weapons and tactics, but the sight of demon engines advancing through their defensive fire, while wreathed in unnatural flames, challenged their fundamental understanding of warfare. The creatures that emerged from these machines when they were finally destroyed defied description, their forms shifting and changing as they moved through real space in ways that violated the basic laws of physics. The first confirmed sighting of a greater demon on Luna sent shockwaves through the loyalist command structure. The entity, identified as a bloodthirster of Khorne, had manifested during the assault on defensive Complex Gamma 7, its presence announced by the spontaneous combustion of the facility's atmospheric processors. The demon's physical form towered above even the Astartes who fought to contain it, its brass armor reflecting the flames that surrounded its massive frame. The creature's weapons, a whip of living flame and an axe forged from the screams of the damned, carved through the defenders' ranks within. Efficiency that spoke to millennia of experience in warfare. The loyalist response to this manifestation revealed both the strengths and weaknesses of their defensive preparations. The Imperial Fist's garrison assigned to the complex had been trained to fight conventional enemies, their tactics emphasizing disciplined firepower and coordinated advances. Against an opponent that could ignore physical laws and whose very presence weakened the barriers between real space and the warp, these conventional tactics proved inadequate. The demon's ability to teleport across the battlefield and its resistance to conventional weapons forced the defenders to adapt their tactics in real time, a process that cost them dearly in both time and casualties. The evacuation of civilian populations from the outer system installations proceeded with the mechanical efficiency that characterized all Imperial military operations, but the scale of the undertaking strained the available transport capacity to its limits. Refugee ships streamed toward Terra's inner system, their holds packed with civilians fleeing the advancing tide of corruption. The sight of these vessels, many showing battle damage from their escape through contested space, served as a constant reminder to the defenders of what was at stake in the coming battle. The intelligence gathered during these initial engagements provided the Loyalist Command with their first comprehensive assessment of the traitor force's capabilities and intentions. The systematic nature of the attacks, combined with the tactical innovations that the enemy had displayed, made it clear that this would not be a conventional siege. The corruption of Imperial technology and the deployment of demonic allies represented challenges that the defenders had not fully anticipated, forcing them to revise their defensive plans and tactical doctrines in response to the evolving threat. The loss of the outer system's early warning network left Terra's defenders effectively blind to the traitor fleet's movements beyond the asteroid belt. The communication relays that had provided real-time intelligence about enemy positions and movements had been systematically destroyed or corrupted, forcing the loyalists to rely on patrol ships and reconnaissance flights for tactical intelligence. This information blackout would prove to be one of the most significant advantages that the traitor forces gained during the opening phases of the siege. The orbital bombardment that preceded the traitor landings was announced by the sudden flare of plasma drives as the Warmaster's fleet moved into bombardment positions above Terra's atmosphere. The assault opened with a coordinated strike from over 200 battleships and heavy cruisers, their macro-cannon batteries and lance arrays targeting the orbital defense platforms that formed the first line of resistance. The void shields protecting these installations flared brilliant white as they absorbed the incoming fire, their energy matrices straining under the sustained assault from weapons designed to crack open the hulls of starships. The bombardment strategy employed by Horus demonstrated the tactical acumen that had made him the Emperor's chosen Warmaster. Rather than attempting to obliterate Terra's defenses through brute force, the traitor fleet concentrated their fire on specific nodes within the defensive network. The targeting priorities had been carefully calculated to maximize the disruption of the loyalist response, while preserving the infrastructure that would be needed for the occupation of Terra. The primary spaceports, industrial complexes, and communication hub received precision strikes designed to disable rather than destroy, while the outer defensive walls absorbed the full fury of the fleet's heaviest weapons. The Lion's Gate spaceport became the focal point of the initial bombardment, as the traitor forces sought to establish their primary beachhead on Terra's surface. This massive facility, stretching across hundreds of square kilometers of the Himalayan plateau, served as the primary interface between Terra's surface and the orbital traffic that sustained the Throneworld's population. The spaceport's defensive systems included void shield generators powerful enough to protect against orbital bombardment, but the sustained fire from multiple battleships gradually overloaded these barriers. The first void shield failure occurred at the spaceport's northern terminal complex, where a concentrated barrage from the Sons of Horus battle barge Warmaster's Pride finally overwhelmed the energy matrix. The macro-cannon rounds that followed carved deep craters in the ferrocrete landing platforms, sending massive chunks of debris spinning through the thin atmosphere. The destruction was precisely controlled, targeting the defensive installations and anti-aircraft batteries, while leaving the landing platforms themselves largely intact. The loyalist resp. Once to the orbital bombardment revealed both the strengths and limitations of Terra's defensive preparations. The planetary defense batteries positioned throughout the Himalayan ranges opened fire on the traitor fleet, their massive guns hurling shells the size of hab blocks into the void. The orbital weapons platforms that had survived the initial assault added their firepower to the defensive barrage, their Nova cannons and Lance batteries reaching out to engage the enemy vessels at extreme range. The coordinated fire from these installations managed to destroy several traitor escorts and forced the heavier ships to maintain greater distances from the planet's surface. The Iron Warriors' expertise in siege warfare became evident as their fleet elements began systematic suppression of Terra's ground-based defenses. The 4th Legion's ships carried specialized bombardment arrays designed specifically for the reduction of fortified positions, their weapons incorporating targeting systems that could identify and prioritize defensive installations with mechanical precision. The bombardment patterns they employed followed mathematical principles that maximized the disruption of defensive fire, while minimizing the exposure of their own vessels to return fire. The atmospheric entry of the first wave of assault craft began, while the orbital bombardment was still in progress, the traitor forces exploiting the gaps in the defensive network created by their fleet's concentrated fire. The assault transports descended through Terra's atmosphere in formations that had been carefully planned to overwhelm the remaining anti-aircraft defenses through sheer numbers. Thunderhawk gunships and Storm Eagles provided escort for the larger transports, their weapon systems engaging the automated defense turrets that tracked the incoming formations. The Lion's Gate Spaceport's final defensive line consisted of surface-to-air missile batteries and rapid-fire autocannon arrays positioned around the facility's perimeter. These weapon systems had been designed to engage conventional aircraft and orbital transports, but the traitor assault craft incorporated modifications that challenged their targeting systems. Void shields mounted on the larger transports deflected incoming missiles, while chaff dispensers and electronic countermeasures disrupted the fire control systems of the defensive installations. The first traitor forces to reach Terra's surface were advanced reconnaissance teams from the Sons of Horus, their modified Thunderhawks touching down in the contested zones around the spaceport's outer perimeter. These initial landings were conducted under heavy fire from the loyalist defenders, with several assault craft destroyed by concentrated fire from the remaining defensive positions. The Astartes who emerged from the surviving transports moved with the practiced efficiency of veterans, their power armor scarred by 7 years of continuous warfare and bearing the 8-pointed star of chaos. The tactical evolution that had occurred within the traitor legions, since their fall became immediately apparent as these advanced elements engaged the Imperial army defenders manning the spaceport's outer defenses. The Sons of Horus assault teams moved through the defensive positions with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural, their tactical awareness enhanced by the gifts of the dark gods. The corruption that had taken hold within their ranks manifested in subtle ways that gave them advantages over their loyalist opponents, their reflexes quickened by exposure to the warp, their combat instincts sharpened by years of fighting alongside demonic allies. The Imperial army regiments defending the spaceport had been drawn from some of the finest formations in the Imperium, their ranks including veterans of the Great Crusade who had fought alongside the Space Marines on dozens of worlds. The Lucifer Blacks, Terra's elite guard regiment, had been reinforced with heavy weapons teams and armored support specifically to counter the expected assault. Their lasguns and heavy bolters opened fire on the advancing traitors, the disciplined volleys creating overlapping fields of fire that should have stopped any conventional assault. The reality of fighting corrupted Astartes proved far more challenging than the defenders had anticipated. The traitor Space Marines advanced through defensive fire that would have decimated normal troops, their power armor absorbing hits that would have been fatal to unaugmented humans. The corruption that had taken hold within their ranks manifested in ways that defied conventional military logic. Some warriors shrugged off wounds that should have incapacitated them, while others moved with an inhuman speed that made them nearly impossible to target effectively. The deployment of super-heavy war machines marked the beginning of the second phase of the traitor assault. The massive transport craft that had been holding position in Terra's upper atmosphere began their descent, their hulls containing the heaviest equipment that the Warmaster's forces could bring to bear. The sight of these transports, each one the size of a small starship, descending through the smoke and flames of the ongoing bombardment, served as a stark reminder of the scale of the invasion force. The first warlord titan to make planetfall was the conqueror of Isstvan, a god machine of the Legio Mortis that had earned its name during the drop site massacre. The massive war engine emerged from its transport with the mechanical precision that characterized all Titan operations, its void shields flickering to life as it took its first steps on Terra's surface. The Titan's weapon systems, including a pair of turbolaser destructors and a volcano cannon capable of reducing buildings to molten slag, began targeting the spaceport's remaining defensive positions with methodical precision. The loyalist response to the Titan's deployment revealed the extent of the preparations that had been made for the defense of Terra. Hidden weapon emplacements throughout the spaceport complex opened fire on the war engine, their heavy las cannons and missile launchers targeting the joints and weapon systems that represented the Titan's most vulnerable points. The coordinated fire from these positions managed to overload sections of the Titan's void shields, but the war engine's thick armor plating absorbed the follow-up shots with minimal damage. The Baneblade super heavy tanks that accompanied the Titan deployment represented the pinnacle of Imperial armored warfare technology. These massive vehicles, each one weighing over 300 tons and mounting enough firepower to level city blocks, had been modified with additional armor plating and upgraded weapon systems. The traitor Baneblades bore the colors of the Iron Warriors, their hulls painted in the hazard stripes that marked them as siege specialists. The tank's multiple weapon systems engaged targets throughout the spaceport complex, their battle cannons and las cannons systematically destroying defensive positions, while their secondary weapons swept the approaches clear of infantry. The ground engagement that developed around the spaceport's main terminal building showcased the tactical innovations that both sides had developed during the Heresy. The loyalist defenders had prepared the facility for siege warfare, with barricades and firing positions constructed throughout the complex's interior spaces. The Imperial Fist's garrison assigned to the spaceport's defense had spent months preparing these positions, their expertise in defensive warfare evident in the overlapping fields of fire and carefully planned fallback positions they had established. The traitor assault on these positions demonstrated the evolution of Space Marine tactics that had occurred since the beginning of the Heresy. The attacking forces employed a combination of conventional assault techniques and innovation that incorporated the gifts of the Dark Gods. Possessed Marines led the advance, their enhanced strength and resilience allowing them to breach defensive positions that would have stopped normal Astartes. The corruption that had taken hold within their ranks manifested in ways that gave them tactical advantages. Some warriors were able to phase through solid matter, while others moved with an inhuman speed that made them nearly impossible to target. The deployment of demon engines during the assault marked a significant escalation in the conflict's supernatural elements. These war machines, their metal shells housing bound entities from the warp, advanced through the spaceport's defensive positions with an unpredictability that made conventional anti-armor tactics ineffective. The defilers and mauler fiends that accompanied the traitor ground forces operated according to principles that defied conventional military logic, their movements guided by the alien intelligence of the demons bound within their mechanical forms. The Mechanicum forces that participated in the assault brought their own specialized equipment to bear against the spaceport's defenses. The Dark Mechanicum tech priests who had declared for the Warmaster deployed war machines that incorporated technologies forbidden by orthodox Imperial doctrine. Their Ordinatus siege engines, massive artillery pieces designed for the reduction of fortified positions, began systematic bombardment of the spaceport's most heavily defended areas. The weapons they employed incorporated daemonic essence that allowed them to punch through defensive barriers with an efficiency that conventional artillery could not match. The first major breakthrough in the loyalist defensive lines occurred at the spaceport's eastern perimeter, where a concentrated assault by World Eater's assault marines overwhelmed the defenders through sheer savagery. The 12th Legion's warriors had been formed by their exposure to the butcher's nails and the corruption of corn, their tactical discipline replaced by an unstoppable hunger for violence. The assault they launched against the defensive positions defied conventional military logic, with individual Marines charging through defensive fire that should have been fatal while their battle brothers followed in their wake. The psychological impact of the World Eater's assault on the Imperial Army defenders cannot be overstated. The soldiers who faced these corrupted Astartes found themselves confronting enemies who seemed to feel no pain and showed no fear, their advance continuing even when they had sustained wounds that would have incapacitated normal humans. The sight of Space Marines, the Emperor's finest warriors, transformed into blood-mad berserkers, challenged the fundamental beliefs of the loyalist forces and forced them to confront the reality of what their former allies had become. The establishment of the first secure beachhead on Terra's surface occurred when the traitor forces successfully captured the Spaceport's main landing platform. This massive structure, capable of accommodating multiple starships simultaneously, provided the traitors with the infrastructure they needed to begin landing their heaviest equipment. The platform's capture allowed the deployment of additional Titan maniples and super-heavy tank companies, their arrival shifting the tactical balance in favor of the attacking forces. The loyalist counterattack that followed demonstrated the tactical flexibility that Rogal Dorn had built into Terra's defensive plans. Imperial Fist's strike teams launched coordinated assaults on the traitor positions from multiple directions, their attacks designed to disrupt the enemy's consolidation of their gains. The counterattacks employed a combination of conventional tactics and innovations that had been developed specifically for fighting corrupted Astartes, including specialized ammunition and weapon systems designed to counter the supernatural abilities that the traitors had gained. The urban combat that developed throughout the Spaceport complex represented a new form of warfare that neither side had fully anticipated. The facility's interior spaces, designed for the efficient movement of cargo and passengers, became killing grounds where individual squads of Space Marines fought desperate battles for control of strategic positions. The close-quarters nature of the fighting negated many of the advantages that the traitor forces' heavy weapons provided, while the loyalist defenders' knowledge of the facility's layout allowed them to conduct ambushes and flanking maneuvers that inflicted significant casualties on the attackers. The deployment of specialized siege equipment by the Iron Warriors marked the beginning of the systematic reduction of the Spaceport's remaining defensive positions. The 4th Legion's engineers brought their expertise in fortress warfare to bear against the loyalist strongholds, their siege drills and demolition charges opening breaches in walls that had been designed to withstand orbital bombardment. The methodical approach that characterized all Iron Warriors' operations became evident as they systematically dismantled the defensive positions that had been carefully prepared by the Imperial Fists. The corruption of the Spaceport's machine spirits represented a new and terrifying development in the traitor arsenal. Dark Mechanicum, adepts accompanying the assault forces, employed techniques that violated the fundamental principles of the Omnissiah's teachings, their rituals binding demonic essence to the facility's control systems. The possessed machines turned against their former masters, blast doors sealing loyalist defenders into sections that were then vented to the void, while automated systems began broadcasting false status reports to the planetary defense network. As the battle for the Lion's Gate spaceport raged with unrelenting fury, the systematic dismantling of Terra's outer defensive rings had already begun across the planet's war-torn surface. The methodical precision that made the Iron Warriors the most feared siege specialists in the galaxy was now brought to bear against the outer walls of the Imperial Palace itself. Perturabo's 4th Legion had spent decades perfecting the art of fortress reduction, their expertise honed through countless campaigns where they had been tasked with breaking seemingly impregnable defenses. The outer walls of the Imperial Palace, massive fortifications that stretched for hundreds of kilometers across the Himalayan plateau, represented the ultimate test of their siege craft, and they approached it with the cold calculation that had become their hallmark. The Siege of Terra had become a battle not merely of armies, but of wills, of ideologies, of brothers turned against brothers in the most terrible civil war humanity had ever known. And as the walls began to crack under the relentless assault, as the defenders fought with desperate courage against overwhelming odds, it became clear that the outcome of this conflict would echo through the millennia to come, shaping the destiny of humanity itself in ways that none could yet imagine. The final confrontation between father and son, between the vision of enlightenment and the embrace of damnation, drew inexorably closer with each passing hour, and the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of what was to come.